The sun hung low like a copper disk, relentless in its heat, bleaching the thatched roofs of Ayero village until they seemed as white as bones. Cracked clay paths wound between mud-walled huts. Once lush yam fields were now dusty patches of hardened earth. People moved languidly, their shoulders slumped under the weight of hunger and fear. Children whose laughter once echoed through groves now sat beneath the sparse shade of neem trees, their lips parched and their eyes tracking unseen rain clouds. Every day, elders gathered under the irako tree at the center of the village, consulting cowries and muttering prayers, but the skies remained an unbroken sheet of bright blue. In Yoruba culture, droughts were not only physical, they signified a spiritual imbalance, a disharmony between humans, ancestors, and the gods. At the head of the village sat Chief Adakunnel, a man whose beaded crown and heavy coral necklaces glittered in the sunlight even as his people wilted around him. His compound was an oasis of wealth, clay jars of water imported from distant streams, granaries with sacks of dried maize, and goats fattened on reserves. While women stood in line with gourds at the chief's gate hoping for a few calabashes of water, Adakunnel relaxed on his carved stool, waving his horsetail whisk and complaining about the dust that sullied his sandals. Beside him, advisors murmured that the gods must be displeased, but he waved them off, believing his sacrifices had been sufficient. In his mind, drought would pass as suddenly as it came, and he would remain the village's patron and benefactor. Among the crowd outside his gate, a poor farmer named Aladil tightened his raffia belt. His cheeks were hollow, his farm barren, but determination burned in his eyes. If the gods needed a plea, he would offer it. If the chief needed persuasion, he would deliver it. Aladil's family had farmed these lands for generations, and he could not bear to watch them wither under a sun that never blinked. Aladil waited until dusk, when the day's heat eased and the chief received petitions. He brushed dust off his worn wrapper, bowed low at the gate, and spoke to the gatekeeper. "Baba me, I must see the chief," he said. "Our yam mounds crumble, the streams are dry. If the drought lasts much longer, children will die. I beg an audience." The gatekeeper, moved more by Aladil's desperation than by custom, announced him. In the courtyard, oil lamps flickered and the scent of spicy goat stew wafted through the air. Chief Adakunnel looked up lazily as the farmer approached. "Who dares disturb my evening meal?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. Aladil prostrated himself fully, forehead touching the earth, before rising to his knees to speak. "Kabiyesi," he began, using the respectful title for the chief. "Forgive my intrusion. Our farms are dying. I have remembered the rain dances my forefathers performed when the heavens closed their doors. If you allow me to organize a communal rain dance, and it brings water from the sky, will you grant me a small plot of your fallow land near the river? It has always been my family's wish to farm by the water." Chief Adakunnel laughed, his gold bracelets jingling. He leaned back and exchanged amused glances with his advisors. "You believe your dance can summon rain? The Babalawo have sacrificed goats and chickens, yet the sky remains sealed. How can a poor farmer succeed where priests have failed?" he scoffed. Aladil held the chief's gaze respectfully but firmly. "I am not alone, Kabiyesi. If the entire village dances and sings with one heart, our ancestors will hear. The gods will pity us." The chief paused, tapping his walking stick on the ground thoughtfully. If by some miracle the rains returned, he would reap the glory. If the dance failed, he could mock Aladil's folly. "Very well," Adakunnel said finally, his eyes gleaming. "If you bring rain within 7 days, you may choose any plot from the land near the Ogun River. If not, you will tend my goats for a season as punishment for wasting my time." A murmur ran through the assemblage. Aladil nodded solemnly and thanked the chief. Outside, the news spread quickly. The farmer had secured a promise. Some villagers laughed nervously at his audacity. Others felt a flicker of hope. Regardless, preparations for the dance began. Word of the upcoming rain dance wove through the village like the threads of a weaver's loom. The women, normally stoic in the face of hardship, showed a glimmer of excitement as they cleaned the village square. Young men repaired the wooden drums that had been silent for too long, stretching animal skins over their hollow bodies and tightening them carefully. Children practiced clapping rhythms, their palms slapping their thighs in unison. Aladil visited the elders under the irako tree, seeking permission to use the sacred masquerade costumes hidden in the shrine. These costumes, normally reserved for the Agungun festival, were believed to call forth ancestral spirits. The elders hesitated, aware of the seriousness of unleashing ancestral energy, but hunger gnawed at their grandchildren's bellies. After consulting Ifa divination, they agreed. Each family contributed something: cola nuts, palm oil, dried fish, or even just a song. The atmosphere shifted from despair to determination as the community united for a common cause. On the evening of the dance, the village square blazed with torches. The drums began with a low, steady beat, mimicking the heartbeat of the earth. Women ululated, high-pitched cries piercing the air and sending shivers down spines. Men wearing the Agungun costumes spun gracefully, long strips of cloth swirling around them like rivers of color. Aladil stood at the center, holding a clay pot filled with river sand. He prayed aloud to Sango, god of thunder, and Oya, goddess of winds, asking them to open the clouds. The entire village circled him, arms raised, feet stomping in the ancient Yoruba pattern meant to awaken the spirits. Songs rose in call and response. "O rain, come from the hills of the east," the women sang. "We are your children, do not forget us," the men replied. As hours passed, dust rose from the villagers' feet, mixing with sweat and tears. Yet they did not stop. They danced until dawn, until voices were raw and bodies trembled. The older children carried water around, so dancers could moisten cracked lips. Even those who doubted participated, fearful of angering the gods with indifference. The dance ended with a solemn prayer, and the people returned to their huts exhausted but unified, their fate placed firmly in the hands of unseen forces. On the second day, clouds began to gather on the horizon. At first, they were distant smudges, easily dismissed as heat haze. But by mid-afternoon, the sky darkened in a way it had not done in months. Whispers spread among the women pounding yam in mortars. Children pointed upward, their eyes wide with disbelief. Chief Adakanal watched from his veranda, the hairs on his arms rising as a cool breeze swept through his compound. The breeze carried with it the smell of wet earth, even though the ground remained dry. Elders emerged from their huts. Faces turned to the heavens, and they began to chant softly. Birds that had long migrated returned, flying erratically as if confused by the changing air. Then, like a drumbeat falling from the sky, the first raindrop hit the dusty village square. It was followed by another, then another, until the earth was alive with tiny explosions of dust turning to mud. Children shrieked with joy, dancing under the droplets, mouths open to catch the water. Women laughed and cried, kneeling to scoop up the wet earth and press it to their foreheads in gratitude. Men who had doubted Aladil's plan shook his hand vigorously, their previous skepticism forgotten. Within minutes, the rain strengthened, transforming into a downpour. Streams of water ran off thatched roofs, formed rivulets along the paths, and filled parched wells. The yam mound softened, the river swelled and gurgled as it welcomed the runoff. Farmers rushed to their farms to plant seeds they had saved for months, eager to take advantage of the moisture. Chief Adakanal watched the rain with a mixture of awe and apprehension. His promise echoed in his mind. He had pledged a piece of fertile land in exchange for rain, never truly believing he would have to part with his property. As the rain continued into the night, drumming on the roof of his palace, he began to calculate how he might circumvent his vow. Perhaps he could give Aladil a smaller, less fertile plot. Perhaps he could claim that the rain would have come anyway, without the dance. Greed whispered into his ear like a mischievous spirit. Unbeknownst to him, other spirits listened too. Spirits who cared little for human justifications and who kept careful records of promises made. With the rain soaking the fields and filling the river, Ayero transformed almost overnight. Within a week, green shoots pushed through the soil and banana leaves unfurled. Markets that had been quiet now buzzed with activity as traders exchanged goods and gossip. Aladil worked tirelessly, helping neighbors replant and sharing his small store of yam seedlings. He had one eye on the riverbanks near the chief's land, imagining the tilled rows he would make on his promised plot. His wife reminded him to approach Chief Adakanal soon, while the chief was still basking in the glory of the returning rain. "Do not let time weaken his memory," she urged. Trusting her wisdom, Aladil washed himself, wore his cleanest agbada and headed to the palace. He found Atakanal sitting under a palm tree, flanked by advisors and sipping palm wine. "Kabiyesi, I greet you," Aladil said, bowing low. "Our hearts are full of gratitude for the rain. I have come to discuss the plot of land you promised." The chief's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. He waved his horsetail whisk, a gesture meant to convey authority. "Ah, Aladil," he drawled. "The rain was indeed generous. However, are you sure it was your dance that summoned it? Perhaps the gods decided on their own to bless us. Besides, I have found out that the land near the river is needed for the expansion of my yam barns. Giving it to you would not be wise for the community." A hush fell over those present. Aladil felt his stomach twist. "Kabiyesi, you gave your word before witnesses," he said quietly but firmly. "The gods heard you." Chief Atakanal's nostrils flared. "Do you dare challenge me?" he snapped. "I am a custodian of this land. I will decide what is best. Do not mistake my earlier indulgence for weakness." Aladil sensed the growing tension. He prostrated again, partly to diffuse the situation and partly in frustration. "I would never challenge you, my chief," he said, his voice muffled against the earth. "I speak only of what was agreed. Please reconsider, for the gods are listening." Atakanal turned away, dismissively. "You may go," he said. "I will send for you if I change my mind." Aladil rose slowly and left the palace, shame burning his cheeks. Those who had witnessed the exchange whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads, sensing trouble. Others muttered that Aladil should have known better than to rely on the chief's generosity. As he walked home, the farmer felt anger and sadness in equal measure. He had not only been denied land, his honor had been questioned. He knelt by the river, cupped water in his hands, and spoke softly to the spirits. "Our ancestors, Sango Oya, hear me. I did my part. The chief has broken his word. Do not let injustice flourish." His words dissolved into the river's current, carried downstream to where unseen ears listened attentively. The Yoruba believe that words have power. A promise is a bond not only between people but between people and the spirits. When Chief Atakanal dismissed his vow, he did more than offend Aladil, he disrupted a sacred balance. The first signs of divine displeasure appeared subtly. One of Atakanal's prized goats, fat and healthy the night before, was found lifeless in the morning, its body swollen, as if from drowning though no water was nearby. The chief shrugged it off, instructing his servants to butcher the goat for a feast. During the feast, a calabash of palm wine slipped from his wife's hands and shattered, spilling its contents onto the ground. The elders shook their heads. "A broken calabash is a broken promise," one muttered. Soon, other misfortunes followed. Grain stored in Atakanal's granary sprouted mold despite the dry season. His youngest son fell ill with a fever that no herbal mixture could break. At night, the chief's sleep was troubled by dreams in which masked ancestors whispered, "Return what is not yours." In one dream, he stood in a field of dried maize that turned into snakes, slithering toward him and hissing. Greed has teeth. Atakanal awoke, drenched in sweat, his beads twisting uncomfortably around his neck. He sent for the babalawo to perform divination. Casting cowries on a wooden tray, the priest looked concerned. "Kabiyesi," he said gravely, "the spirits are angry. They say you have taken what belongs to another. The only remedy is to fulfill your promise." The chief bristled. "You, too, dare to lecture me?" he thundered. The priest lowered his eyes. "I only relay what the cowries reveal," he replied. "Ignoring them will invite further calamity." Atakanal dismissed the babalawo with a wave. In his mind, these were coincidences, manageable setbacks. He believed his wealth insulated him from misfortune. Yet, as days turned into weeks, his misfortunes compounded. Traders began to whisper that the chief's warehouses were cursed. They preferred to buy from other villages. The once steady flow of gifts and tributes slowed. Meanwhile, Aladil's farm, though small and borrowed, flourished beyond expectations. The yams on his meager plot grew tubers as large as clay pots. Neighbors murmured that the gods were blessing him. The contrast between the farmer's burgeoning field and the chief's decaying stores did not go unnoticed. Despite his bitterness, Aladil focused on cultivating what little land he had, some borrowed ridges on his uncle's farm. He and his wife rose before dawn, hoeing the softened earth and planting maize, okra and cassava. Their hands moved with practiced efficiency, even as their minds wandered to the injustice they had suffered. Each evening, tired muscles aching, Aladil would sit on a wooden stool outside his hut, watching the sun sink behind distant trees. He listened to the village storytellers recount tales of kings who broke oaths and faced ruin. These stories strengthened his resolve. "The gods will not abandon the just," he told his wife. "All I can do is work and wait." Community members noticed Aladil's dignity. Some offered extra seeds, others left bundles of firewood at his door. Elders occasionally stopped by his farm, tapping their walking sticks on the ground. "Your father would be proud," one said. "He was an honorable man. Stand firm." Even children, aware of the story, brought him wild fruits they gathered. Such gestures reminded Aladil that while the chief's word had failed, the community's solidarity had not. He found solace in the knowledge that he had acted honorably and in the belief that ancestral justice moved at its own pace. One evening, as he watered young yam plants with river water he had hauled in gourds, Aladil heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Chief Adakanal's eldest daughter, Adizwa, standing at the edge of his field. She wore simple wrappers instead of her usual lavish fabrics. "Bawo ni," she greeted softly. Aladil wiped his brow. "Fine, my princess," he replied cautiously. "To what do I owe this visit?" Adizwa glanced around to ensure privacy. "My father is stubborn," she said, her voice trembling. "But I fear for our household. Our barns are rotting, and my brother's fever grows. I know this is because he broke his promise to you. Please, appeal to the gods on our behalf. Ask them to spare us." Aladil's heart softened at her plea. "I will pour libations and speak to them," he promised. "But your father must also correct his wrong. Tell him that stubbornness invites the wrath of Sango." Adizwa nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I will tell him again," she whispered before hurrying back. Chief Adakanal's pride grew more entrenched even as his fortunes waned. Each new misfortune he met with denial or anger. When his eldest daughter relayed Aladil's message, he dismissed it with a snort. "Nonsense," he said. "This is a test of my strength. The village must see I cannot be manipulated by peasants or frightened by old wives' tales." He tightened the security around his granary, suspecting theft rather than divine retribution. At night, he doubled the number of guards at his compound gates, thinking envious neighbors plotted his downfall. His advisers, fearful of his temper, told him what he wanted to hear. "The famine elsewhere is worse, Kabayisi," they assured him. "Your stores are still abundant compared to others." Meanwhile, rumors spread beyond Ayero. Travelers from other villages, stopping by to trade, carried tales of a chief cursed for breaking a promise. Some embellished the story with supernatural elements, pythons slithering through Adakanal's palace, ghostly drums beating at night. Whether true or exaggerated, these tales damaged the chief's reputation. Delegations that once sought his counsel began to bypass Ayero, seeking leaders perceived as more just. The drought had tested all villages, and those with generous leaders shared their resources, earning respect. Adakanal's hoarding and deceit set him apart in the worst way. One market day, as Adakanal walked through the stalls hoping to assert his authority, a hawker accidentally spilled palm oil on his embroidered wrapper. Normally, the chief would have laughed or shrugged it off, but his nerves were frayed. He exploded in anger, slapping the hawker and ordering his arrest. The market fell silent. Several elders stepped forward. "Kabayisi, the man meant no harm," they pleaded. "We all make mistakes." Adakanal's jaw clenched. "I will tolerate no disrespect," he snapped. Word of the incident spread quickly. People muttered that the chief had lost not just favor with the gods, but also his sense of proportion. In Yoruba cosmology, leaders were expected to balance authority with compassion. Losing that balance invited chaos. The more Adakanal dug in his heels, the deeper the hole he dug for himself. The curse's grip tightened around Adakanal's household. The chief's wives, once adorned with beads and gold, began to pawn their jewelry discreetly to purchase medicine for the feverish child. The child's illness baffled healers. His skin felt alternately hot and cold, and he whispered incoherently about masked figures calling his name. The wives argued among themselves, each blaming the other's ancestors for bringing misfortune. Servants, fearful of contagion and tired of the chief's temper, started to leave, returning to their families or seeking employment in neighboring villages. Without enough hands, the chief's compound fell into disrepair. Weeds grew in the courtyards, pots cracked and were not replaced, and goats roamed freely, nibbling at ornamental plants. In the granary, rodents proliferated. They chewed through sacks of maize and left droppings that made the grain inedible. When Atakunal ordered new traps, the blacksmith delivered them reluctantly after repeated reminders. Previously, artisans rushed to fill the chief's orders, hoping to gain favor. Now they worked slowly, citing other commitments. On the rare occasions when visitors came to pay respects, they could not hide their shock at the compound's neglect. "Is this the house of Atakunal the Prosperous?" one old friend whispered to another. "What happened here?" The other shook his head. "Greed blinds and starves," he replied softly. One night, desperate and shaken, Atakunal went alone to the shrine of Ogun, god of iron and warriors. He knelt before the iron tools arranged on the packed earth floor. "Ogun, I have honored you with sacrifice," he whispered. "Why do you abandon me?" A sudden gust extinguished his oil lamp, plunging the shrine into darkness. In the silence, he heard a faint rustling, like dried leaves. Then a voice seemed to emanate from the iron implements, low and resonant. "Promises bind like iron. When you break them, you weaken yourself." Atakunal trembled. For the first time, he sensed that his suffering was not random. Still, part of him resisted. "What of my authority?" he murmured. "Will I not seem weak if I bow to a poor farmer?" The voice replied, "Real strength lies in keeping your word." By dawn, the chief was haggard. He emerged from the shrine shaken, but not yet transformed. Pride still clung to him like a heavy cloak, even as its weight pressed him down. While the curse gnawed at Atakunal's wealth, Aladil's modest life brightened. His small borrowed plot yielded an unexpected bounty. The yam tubers were so large that strangers passing by would stop to marvel. His wife sold surplus okra at the market, trading it for smoked fish and fabric. They repaired their leaking roof, mended their children's clothes, and even helped an elderly neighbor fix a collapsed kitchen wall. Far from gloating, Aladil remained humble. "All blessings come from the Creator," he reminded his family. "We must share what we can." On market days, he quietly paid for an extra portion of gari for a widow. He visited the shrine and poured libations, thanking the gods for their kindness and asking them to soften Atakunal's heart. Children gravitated toward Aladil's compound. He told them stories while mending farming tools, teaching them proverbs about integrity. "The child who tells the truth might receive a beating today, but will wear a crown tomorrow," he would say. They listened wide-eyed, internalizing lessons their own parents were too preoccupied to impart. Elders occasionally joined these sessions, contributing their own tales about legendary kings who built their reputations on fairness and generosity. In this way, Aladil's compound became a small moral center of the village. The contrast between Aladil's growing abundance and the chief's dwindling fortunes became a favorite topic at the palm wine tapper's hut. Men gathered after work, wiping foam from their upper lips, shaking their heads and saying, "Ojiti Akila," meaning, "Shame has fallen upon the proud." A few cautioned against open criticism, fearful of retribution, but most believed that the chief's power was waning. One afternoon, Aladil's uncle pulled him aside. "Be careful," he warned. "Envy is a dangerous fire. Even those who have wronged you may see your blessings and try to tarnish them. Do not give anyone cause to say you are disrespectful or boastful." Aladil nodded, grateful for the reminder. He resolved to continue working quietly, avoiding unnecessary confrontation, trusting that the gods' justice would play out fully in its own time. As Atakunal's misfortunes accumulated, he finally agreed to consult not just any Babalawo, but the most revered diviner from a distant town, known for his ability to interpret the will of even the most inscrutable spirits. When the elderly diviner arrived, dressed in faded white and carrying a worn bag of sacred items, the chief bowed slightly, a rare gesture of respect. The diviner entered the palace, chanted ancient verses, and prepared his opan ifa, the wooden divination tray. He tapped on it rhythmically with an irok ifa, a carved ivory divining tapper, and poured powdered chalk onto the tray. He then placed 16 icon, sacred palm nuts, in his left hand and tossed them into his right, counting the remainder. He repeated this ritual several times, tracing patterns in the chalk dust. After a long moment of silent contemplation, the diviner spoke. Kabiyisi, the Odu divination sign, Ogundo Ose appears. It speaks of a leader who made a pact and did not fulfill it. The spirits of the river and the ancestors are displeased. They have withheld their protection from your household. The only remedy is to restore what you have taken and offer sacrifices to atone for the broken promise. Adakanal clenched his jaw. Is there no other way? He asked. The diviner shook his head. The spirits are clear. If you continue to resist, your wealth will decay completely, and your lineage may be cut short. But if you make amends, not only will your fortunes return, but your reputation will be restored. That night, as Adakanal sat alone in his chamber, he felt a heaviness pressing down on him. Shadows flickered on the walls from the oil lamp, looking like ancestral figures. He thought of his father, who had always counseled fairness. He imagined his own children facing ruin because of his stubbornness. At some point in the long hours before dawn, something within him cracked. He whispered into the dark, I understand. Sleep came, and with it a dream. He stood at the riverside, watching Aladil plant yams. Suddenly, his father appeared beside him, younger than he remembered. My son, the old man said, power is heavy when carried alone. Promises lighten the load when kept, but break one and it becomes a rock that drags you down. Adakanal awoke before he could answer, his heart pounding. For the first time, he allowed the possibility of yielding to enter his mind fully. The next morning, Adakanal summoned his council of elders and announced that he would address the village at midday. Word spread quickly. People abandoned half-pounded yam and hasty repairs to attend, curiosity sparking in their eyes. At the appointed time, the square filled with villagers, farmers, traders, children and elders, all murmuring. Aladil stood toward the back, his heart beating fast. He had not been invited, but he knew he had to witness whatever was to come. The chief arrived dressed modestly, without his usual heavy beads or ornate sandals. He carried no horsetail whisk. Some women gasped. They had never seen him so plainly dressed. He climbed the platform at the center of the square, cleared his throat, and raised his hands for silence. My people, Adakanal began, his voice unusually subdued, we have faced drought and misfortune. I made a promise to a farmer that I did not keep. I told myself I did so for the good of the village, but in truth, I feared losing what I had. The gods have shown me that a broken promise is worse than a lost field. Therefore, I have decided to honor my word. A murmur ran through the crowd, a mixture of surprise and relief. Adakanal continued, Aladil, come forward. People turned to look at Aladil, parting to let him pass. He felt his legs tremble as he walked toward the platform. When he reached the chief, he knelt. Adakanal extended his hands and lifted him gently. I wronged you, he said loudly enough for all to hear. In front of our ancestors, our deities, and these witnesses, I apologize. I give you the plot of land by the Ogun River that I promised. In addition, I will provide you with tools and 2 goats to aid your farming. Shock rippled through the square. Tears filled some eyes. The elders nodded approvingly. This is good, one whispered. Adakanal turned back to the crowd. I ask for your forgiveness, and I promise to lead with integrity henceforth. Anyone I have wronged should come to me, and we will make amends. His voice broke slightly on the last words. Adizwa, standing to the side, smiled faintly, relief washing over her. Aladil lowered his head. Kabiyisi, may the gods bless you for this, he said. I accept your apology. The crowd erupted into ululation and applause, a sound that seemed to rise up and mingle with the last of the rain clouds still lingering on the horizon. Adakanal did not stop at public apology. Following the diviner's instructions, he prepared offerings to appease the offended spirits. He led a procession to the river where he poured libations of palm wine and honey, accompanied by chants from the Babalawo. He sacrificed a ram at the shrine of Sengo, promising never again to let pride cloud his judgment. At the shrine of Oya, he offered a colorful cloth and asked for renewal. These rituals were witnessed by villagers, reaffirming the community's connection to their gods and reminding them that even leaders were subject to divine laws. When Adacunnel returned home, he ordered repairs to his compound and granary, not as displays of wealth, but as acts of stewardship. He instructed his servants to distribute some of his stored grain to families that still struggled. The transformation in Adacunnel's household was slow but noticeable. The sick child's fever broke. Goats gave birth to healthy kids. Traders who had avoided the chief returned, tentatively at first, then with more confidence as they saw his behavior consistently reflect his words. Adacunnel's wives, who had been anxious and quarrelsome, regained their composure, working together to restore harmony. The chief himself made a point of attending village meetings under the irako tree, listening more and speaking less. When disputes arose, he mediated fairly, sometimes deferring to elders or to communal consensus. He knew that regaining trust took more than a single gesture. Aladil, now owner of the river plot, wasted no time. The land was fertile, black soil rich with silt from the recent rains. He cleared weeds, built ridges, and planted a variety of crops: yam, maize, peppers, and okra. He used the goats the chief provided to plow, their hooves turning the earth efficiently. Neighbors came to help, not out of obligation but out of genuine goodwill. Aladil often paused to look at the shining river flowing gently beside his land. He felt gratitude not only for the physical property but for the restoration of justice. His children played near the water, their laughter carrying across the fields. At night, as he lay beside his wife under a sky studded with stars, he whispered prayers of thanks. The curse had been lifted from the village, and a new chapter had begun. Months passed, and the seeds planted after the rain dance grew into a plentiful harvest. Farms across Ayero overflowed with produce. The village organized a yam festival, Isis Day, combining celebration with thanksgiving to the gods and ancestors. Drums beat joyfully, masquerades danced through the streets, and women wore their brightest wrappers. Aladil arrived at the festival with baskets of yams from his new plot, presenting the largest tuber to Chief Adacunnel as a peace offering. The chief accepted it humbly, recognizing the symbolic reversal. What he had once withheld was now freely given back in friendship. He publicly praised Aladil's perseverance and integrity, encouraging young men to see him as an example. During the festival, elders and storytellers recounted the tale of the broken promise and its resolution. They emphasized that the drought had tested not just the crops but the character of the community. Promises are like kola nuts, one elder said, holding up the nut for all to see. When shared fairly, they bring sweetness. But if one person eats what belongs to another, bitterness remains. Children listened intently, aware that they were hearing history being made, a story that would be told to their grandchildren. Even travelers from other villages took note, carrying the lesson back home that leadership requires humility and accountability. The transformation in Adacunnel continued to ripple outward. He initiated projects to repair communal wells and rebuild the marketplace roof. He involved the youth in planning, ensuring they felt invested in the village's future. He held open forums where villagers could voice concerns. At first, people approached cautiously, but gradually they began to trust that their words would not be met with anger. The chief no longer saw suggestions as challenges to his authority, but as contributions to collective well-being. For Aladil, life settled into a rhythm of cultivation and community service. He joined the Council of Farmers, advising on irrigation and sustainable practices. He mentored young farmers, teaching them both agricultural techniques and moral lessons. He never forgot the hardship he had endured, nor did he let the bitterness linger. Instead, he channeled his experience into advocacy for fairness. "Let this not happen again in Ayero," he often said. "Let us honor our words so the gods will honor us." Years later, the story of Aladil and Chief Adacunnel became part of Ayero's oral tradition. Grandparents told it around fires as stars glittered above, weaving it into the fabric of other tales about trickster tortoises and brave hunters. The moral resonated each time. Community prosperity depends on trust, and trust rests on promises kept. Visitors to the village were shown the fertile field by the river and told, "This land reminds us of a promise broken and later fulfilled." Children playing near the river learned to respect it, remembering that it had borne witness to both greed and redemption. Chief Adacunnel grew older and eventually passed his title to his son, who had grown up watching his father's transformation. This heir led with humility from the outset, building on the lessons learned and ensuring that decisions were made in consultation with elders, youths, and women. He spoke often of his father's mistake not to mock him, but to illustrate that even those in power could err and then correct their paths. Under his leadership, Ayero prospered further, forging alliances with neighboring villages and participating in regional markets. The story of the broken promise served as both caution and inspiration. Aladil lived to see his children cultivate the land he had fought for. His eldest daughter became a renowned herbalist, his son a respected drummer who played at festivals across Yorubaland. When Aladil was an old man, he would sit beneath the irako tree with other elders, listening to younger storytellers recount his tale. He did not interrupt them to correct details. He allowed the story to take on a life of its own, knowing that the essence was intact. Sometimes, when the storyteller described the moment he had confronted the chief, Aladil's eyes would glisten with tears, not of anger or sadness, but of gratitude for the journey that had strengthened both him and his village. The drought was a distant memory, but its lessons endured. Every time clouds gathered on the horizon, villagers remembered the rain dance and the collective effort it required. Every time a promise was made, from simple transactions to major decisions, people thought of Adakunal and Aladil. The story became a compass, guiding behavior. Ayero thrived not because the rains were always abundant, but because its people had learned that integrity nourishes a community as surely as water nourishes the soil.